This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And before we get into today's episode, I wanted to let you know, if you didn't know already, I have a Star Wars book giveaway going on right now. It is a hardcover copy of Claudia Gray's Bloodline. Those are not easy to find. I have one, and I'm giving it away to whoever wants to enter to win. It also has the Vote for Leia poster. If you want to see a picture of what all of that looks like, and if you want to learn more about how to enter the giveaway, it is pinned to the Star Wars Book Reviews profile on Instagram. I will also link to that in the show description, so you can easily find it. That's where you will learn how to enter, and I will announce the winner on May 4th to celebrate Star Wars Day. If you want to enter to win, learn how. Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram. Good luck. This week, I am joined by Arezou from the Geeky Waffle to talk about Tales of Light and Life, which is the High Republic short story anthology that came out last year. Better late than never, right? This was a fantastic conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Weirdly, we don't talk enough about the High Republic on this show. I'm so behind on discussions, which is not a problem. But now we're catching up on a book that came out in September.
Well, everybody reads at a different pace, so
yes,
hopefully
exactly.
by now everybody's caught up.
Well, that's why I love the discussions, because I'm like, no matter when you read it, you can go listen to the thing that we talked about after we had read it. It's always there for you. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, don't feel like you have to rush through a book, or don't feel bad that you're not reading it along with everyone else, because there will always be someone who's willing to talk about it with you. I'm like, it's okay.
Yeah. I also like podcasting about books after the fact, because like I'll read them and then I'll have some time to like chew on them and really think about them, as opposed to like jumping in with an opinion.
Yeah, my intention has always been like a month. So like the book comes out and then like a month later to do the discussion. Never has happened. I'm always behind, but that's okay.
You have good intentions.
I do. That's all that matters. There are my questions. I don't have dual monitors right now either. We are on that struggle bus today. Is it Monday? It's Monday. It's a new month.
It is Monday. It's the Mondayest of Mondays.
It really is. March said, "Oh, you wanted me to end nicely?" Nah. It's all good. Okay. Let's talk about books. Let's talk about Star Wars. Let's talk about the High Republic. Let's talk about you first, because, your first time on the show, which is always fun. And I like to give you a chance to let people get to know you. But first, I always like to ask, what Star Wars are you currently reading, or what have you read most recently?
So most recently, I guess this would have been last week, I finally read Shadows of Starlight. Finally. And it was so good. I love a good, tight comic arc. I'm not a big comics reader, but I do read all the High Republic comics because I have to read everything. So I just read Shadows of Starlight. I loved it. Loved it.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be like
really
vignette-y going in, like each issue was following a different POV, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. But having read it now, I'm like, this is the best decision they could have possibly made. To tell the story this way.
I think I've read 3 of the 4 issues. I have not read the last one yet, but I read the first one and I was like, this is like if someone is a fan of the High Republic and had wanted to get into the comics, like this is like the perfect comic
Mm-hmm.
because you're like it's just so good. I like every single point of view that you get and knowing, what's happening in the time period of what has just happened and what's going to happen and that kind of like in between of the two phases. It wasn't necessary, but I'm so glad that we got it. And I feel like that's the case with like a lot of, if not most of, the High Republic comics, which I'm so behind on, and I hate that. But I'm trying to catch up. There's just so many now. Because
There's
if you don't
so
like,
much.
this is what happened. I was like, okay, beginning of 2024, it's January. I'm going to keep up with all the new comics that come out so that I don't get behind. And what happened? I got behind on 1 week, and now I'm behind on everything. It's hard.
It,
It's so hard.
it's an embarrassment of riches. It really is. Like there is so much of it. But I agree with I agree with you in terms of the comics. It's the best possible like comic entry point because everything else
Yeah.
is like a longer arc, or like thinking back to phase one, like Trail of Shadows would be possibly another good entry point. But Trail of Shadows is like a very focused story following these two characters
Mhm.
we don't really see much of. But this is like
Yeah.
such a broad picture of our main players in the
Yeah.
aftermath of Starlight that it's just like that is the best entry point for this is what the comics do and this is the kind of stories they tell.
Yeah. And I know so many people who were like, these are questions I wanted answered when
Mm-hmm.
phase three came around. That the comic was like, here's how this happened. Here was this conversation. And I'm like, it was everything about it was perfect. I say that even not having read all of it, but we can
It's
assume.
true. It's true.
Yes.
Like for all four of them, kind of by the time we catch up to them in Eye of Darkness, it's like, well, how did you
Yeah.
get here? And it's like, that's how they got there. And it sets it up so nicely.
Yeah. And I love how with Shadows of Starlight and Eye of Darkness, like no matter which one you read first, you kind of like you enter knowing what's going on. Because in Eye of Darkness, they do a great job of like summarizing. Here's really quickly what happened that the comic told you, but if you didn't read it, here you go, because that's how kind of all the High Republic works. They kind
Mm-hmm.
of just quickly are like, let's catch you up really fast, which I love. But then you also have the option to go back and like experience the full story if you want to. I love it. It's a really, really good comic. Highly
It
recommend
really is.
that everyone reads it. Oh, I'm so glad that you finally got to it.
Like I loved it. So yeah.
Yes. All right, let's talk more about you and more about books.
Amazing.
Yeah, tell me about how you got into Star Wars books and kind of like your journey from like there to, how books play a role in you and your life now.
This is such a journey that we're about to go on.
Yes, I love it. I
So
already love it.
when the Phantom Menace came out, so we're really going back.
Yes.
I had gotten my brother the novelization for his birthday. And like because we shared all our books, like I also read it. And I was like, oh my God, this is like enhancing the movie because you have a
Mm,
chance to like get in characters' heads. And I didn't really have the vocabulary for that when I was 8, but that was
mm.
kind of what I had been thinking. So that was like the first time that I was like, oh, this could really like go into this in more detail. And then did not read another Star Wars book again for a very long time, just from like a lack of access and kind of getting distracted with other things. But then
Yeah.
in 20 Christmas 2017, like early winter 2018, this is like my origin story. I had an argument with somebody over The Last Jedi, and I was like, I didn't tell them this like in the
Mm,
moment because I would never admit defeat like this, but I'm like, I
never.
don't have the canonical information to explain why what you're saying is stupid. So what I'm going to do is go read every single canon book. So the next time we have this argument, I will be armed with more information. And we never had that
Oh
conversation again. So I wound up
my
not
God.
needing it for that. But I sort of started like just reading them all and in whatever order I could get my hands on them. And then flash forward a couple years, it's April 2020, we are in lockdown
Mm,
and my work had like closed for a bit while they were trying to figure out how to shift to remote and I was bored. So I was like, I'm gonna review the books I own, like all the books I own, and I own quite a few.
mm,
And I'm like, let me start with Star Wars because that's pretty contained. I'm like, let me start with Jedi Lost and go from there chronologically
mm.
and just sort of examine them, like what I liked, what I didn't like, how do they all tie together as like part of this larger canon tapestry. And that sort of became the gateway into like public fandom was me talking about these books. So
Mm,
like I would not be sitting here having this conversation with you if it weren't for books. Any of my friends that I have met like on Twitter in the Star Wars space, we would not know each other
mm,
if I hadn't decided to start going through these chronologically, because I didn't have the guts to like call myself a creator or a creative or an active fan in this space without those book reviews.
mm. Wow. I love how you were like, I don't know enough to prove you wrong, but let me fix that really quick.
Like, I know in my heart you're wrong, but I don't have enough facts to tell you why you're wrong.
I love that. I love the weapon of knowledge. Oh,
Like
it's
driven
so good.
purely by spite.
Oh, it's perfect. I mean, that's how it should be. Books have such a power to bring people together. And like,
Hmm.
I have not noticed that more than I have when the High Republic came along.
Oh my
Because even
God.
like when Light of the Jedi came out and everyone was like, this new era of Star Wars is starting. Let's all talk about it. Let's do book clubs. Let's like do all these things. And like I'd never seen something at quite that scale before. Because I mean, like I had read Legends before they were Legends,
Hmm.
but I'm not that old, you know? So like when all these Legends conversations were like happening, you know, and everyone was like in the EU and the New Jedi Order was coming out, like I was too young really to be into all of that. So like I didn't experience really book things like that until like the High Republic came along and we were like, we have no idea what this is. And then the added uniqueness of this is an era that's never been explored before. And
Hmm.
everyone is so like supportive of each other and like, oh, you want to read the High Republic? Here are the books you should read. And this is my favorite because, and oh, like you thought you wanted to skip this one, but here's why I think you shouldn't. And everyone is just like, here's why you should read it and giving all these amazing reasons for it. And I love it. And
I
I
love
never
it.
want it to end. And I know it's going to technically, but
But
I try not to
isn't
think
the
about that too hard.
there's so much space for them to continue this after like the three initial phases are done.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
one-offs and little things here. There's so much room for it.
Yeah.
But I have
Yeah.
confidence this is not like as we start to, because I think we now have more behind us than we do ahead. But even
Yeah.
as
I
we
think
like
so.
wind down on it, I'm confident it's not the end. It can't
Yeah.
like it can't be.
Yeah. Well, I think the High Republic as we know it will end. Like there won't be another like phase. But I
Like a
do
big
feel
art,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I do feel like it could be a situation where, like all other eras in Star Wars, you just get a story set in the High Republic era every once in a while. Or like here's a
Hmm.
book that's set, you know, between this time and it's High Republic time. And like that would not be hard to do. And I'm sure like plenty of authors who are already writing the High Republic or authors who've never written the High Republic and are like, I want to do this. And they're like, yeah, every once in a while, let's do a High Republic story. Like I could see that definitely
Oh
being a
yeah.
thing.
I understand why they keep it to like one team for now
Yeah.
because it
Mhm.
like we were saying like with Shadows of Starlight and Eye of Darkness, if you're going to be weaving it into each other this tightly, you need to keep like the number of people doing it very small
Yeah.
just for like logistic reasons. But like you
Yeah.
said, like after this is done, there's no reason they can't be like, "Hey, you like this? Do you want to write a book?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's been so successful that I couldn't imagine why they wouldn't do that.
Exactly.
And the dog agrees. It's great. I love that.
See, there we go. It's general consensus by everyone in the room.
Do you have a favorite? This is a hard question because I don't know if I even have an answer. Do you have a favorite? Is also because it's not over yet. Let's say so far. Do you have a favorite
Okay.
phase?
Feel like for now, it's phase one. I don't know
Mm,
if it's because, it's only been like what, 3 years since phase one, but I feel
yeah.
like in those 3 years, I have a degree of nostalgia for it already. Like it was
Oh,
just such a time. It was all new. It was this like completely unprecedented era with these new characters and these themes that we kind of like hinted at, but never really fully explored. And it was just
mm,
because of the power of what it was doing. I
yeah.
feel like I look on that time, like the phase one era with such fondness now that it like so far is my favorite era or my
Yeah.
favorite
I
phase.
love, yeah. It's hard because like I love phase one because it's the beginning and it was so
Hmm.
exciting coming out. And like you said, there is that level of nostalgia where like I remember where I was when this book came out or this book came out.
Hmm.
But I also love Phase 2 because I love the characters and I love going back and exploring like what happened before to get us to this point. I love prequels. They just make me happy in general. But then we got to Phase 3 and I was like, I am so into this, like more than I ever have been before. So I don't know anymore.
I
Maybe I
like
don't have a favorite and I will just love all of it.
I think already phase three is like a pretty strong contender for favorite phase because now is when they're starting to kind of ask those questions that fascinate me about Star Wars, like particularly like what
Mm,
is the role of the Jedi? And like what
mm,
do we mean as an organization, as people? Like what do we owe to the galaxy? What do we owe to each other? These questions of attachment, of, like love, be it platonic, romantic, whatever, like within the order, like for each other, all of these questions that we like to joke about in the prequel era.
mm.
It's not really a joke here. Like this is so
Yeah,
much the fabric of who they are as character. And there's obviously so much beyond the Jedi, but just in terms of just those questions,
yeah,
it's so fascinating to me that like phase three is already a contender.
yeah. Yeah, we're not that far in really, if you think about it. Um, I mean, what we've gotten in Phase 3 for me, I think has been like some of the it's been like the best trio, I think, for me so
Hmm.
far. Um, and I can't believe we're getting more so soon, but I do like it is more spread out. That's what they're doing this phase, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels
It
like, oh,
doesn't.
we just got a High Republic book in March, but now like we're getting one in June, but June feels like it'll be here in 2 seconds. I don't know.
It really does. Like I think like having comics in between for those that are reading the comics as well
Mm,
kind of bridges the book gaps. And like I admit I'm behind on comics. I only just read Shadows of Starlight, but
yeah.
like just because it's in the conversation and like just the length of these conversations, because like I think we were saying before we started recording that like people don't read at the same pace, so the
Mhm.
conversations last a lot longer than they would for like a television episode,
Yeah,
so it feels so much longer, like these discussions, and therefore the time between books feels so much shorter.
it does. I feel like the time between now and when we get that last book that's been announced, it's going to feel
Hmm.
like a long time, but it's also not going to.
It
And
could
I'm
be here
ready, but
before
I'm
we
not
know it.
ready. Yeah. I can't believe that. I can't
Like
believe we first heard about whatever the secret initiative was going to be like, or was going to be in 2019. Didn't know what it was, but it had the secret name. And now it's almost over.
by December, because we're getting the audio drama in December, and that's the last book for Wave 2. So by
Ugh,
December, Wave 2 is going to be done.
I
And
can't.
like, yeah, it's only just April now, but December's not that far away, relatively speaking.
No, it's not. What is time?
Honestly.
Speaking of time, speaking of time, I can do this. I can segue. We can do it. Something that I love about this short story anthology set in the High Republic called Tales of Light and Life, which for some reason I can never say correctly. I always want to put the wrong adjectives or whatever in there. I don't know. That's not even the correct. It's fine. Um, I love that it spans different phases and different times in the High Republic because to me that makes the High Republic initiative somehow within this anthology and then overall feel so much even more connected.
Hmm. I agree.
And yeah, I think it was a really good idea to do something like this because we didn't have, the High Republic is, it's become known for experimenting with these different formats of storytelling and putting them all together and seeing like how this multimedia initiative can work. And it has worked very well. So I hope we get something like it again in the future. Um, and so this is one of those things that they were like, what if we did a short story anthology, which is not new for Star Wars books. There's been plenty of those. And so many of them are so good.
Yeah.
Um, let's take one of those, let's do one of those, but let's do it all in the same era and take all the authors that are already writing in this initiative and have them each do a story. I love it so much because you get a story from everyone.
Yeah. Like all, what, 10 of them?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I
It's a
counted all
lot
10
in a
of
good
them.
way. Yeah.
It is. And it was so smart to do it the way they did it and when they did it, because like you said, like it's
Yeah.
across phase two, phase one, and like the beginnings of phase three. Because like now we're sort of in the throes of phase three, and as the new comics come out and as the books come out, they're like, see, this is why phase two mattered. not that like those of us who were like in the know, we knew that phase 2 was going to matter. We knew it wasn't a
Yeah,
jump
yeah,
to the
yeah.
past for no reason, because it's like the movies, like we had the originals, then we had the prequels to kind of fill that in. But like we knew it mattered, but we weren't going to start seeing those connections till phase 3 started. So having it
Mm,
all kind of be in this one anthology and going from one phase to the next, like thematically and kind of bridging those gaps in one space, was the best way for them to tell people before phase 3 started that this is
mm,
why phase 1 and 2 like matter together.
yeah, yeah. It did that really well. And
Hmm.
I found it like a really good like palate cleanser almost between like getting the end of phase 2 and the beginning of phase 3 because you're going back and you're kind of, revisiting certain characters or certain events that are happening. But then also you're kind of like preparing for what's to come. And because I re-listened to the book really quick before we did this recording, and I picked up on things that I hadn't before in terms of like, oh, like when this story ends, Vernestra's story, for example, that's why she ends up where she is at the beginning of Defy the Storm. Like I didn't pick that up in my head because I didn't remember because it'd been a long time since I read it.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, like you don't need to have read these stories to appreciate the stories that come after, but those connections are there. And I love that. I love it.
Hmm. I love the little like connective tissue, because that's why I started reading Star Wars books in the first place, besides
Mm,
the spite, was like why I started reading them in order, was to find that connected tissue. And I think this
yeah.
does that so well. It's like not just where was Buryaga, but like here's where he was, here's how Belle found him, here's why it matters. Because it does kind of touch
Mm,
on that in Shadows of Starlight, but comics are awesome, but comics don't really get into people's heads because that's not the
yeah.
medium it's for.
Right.
But this really gets in like into Belle's head and really looks at that. And this book does that so well for all of the characters
Mm,
that it follows, like in each of the 10 short stories.
yeah. Let's go into this. Do you have a couple favorites? Because there are 10 of them. And I think all of them
Yes.
deserve to be read, but let's like focus on the ones that we love the most.
All right, I have the book with me because I'm terrible with names. So let me just pull up the
Yeah,
names of the
I'm like,
stories.
I know what mine are, but I don't remember what they're called.
I'm going by author. I'm like, it's this one and this one. So The Queen's Bloom, A Closed
Oh,
Fist
that's
Has
so
No
good.
Claws, and The Call of Coruscant are my three favorite.
Oh, those are so good. Those are so good.
They're
A closed
just
fist has
each
no
for different
claws.
reasons, but
Yes.
that was chilling. A Closed Fist Has No
I
Claws.
It's one of my favorite Star Wars short stories ever. Um, I loved Martha as a character in phase 2 and like there was so much question of like how do we get from her to what we saw starting happening in phase 1, and the story is so good at like, oh, like this is the path that she went down after leaving a different kind of path. um Tessa Gratton just crushes it every single time. And the short story was kind of like, I kind of it was this doesn't always happen to me,
Mhm.
but it was one of those instances where I finished it and I had to like stop and just think for a minute. I had to be like, I need to process what I've just read.
It was just, it's one of those stories. Like sometimes there'll be stories that like what's happening is what's happening,
Yeah.
like on the page, and I'm rolling with it, and it's great, and it's making me think about things, and obviously there's like deeper themes at play, whatever. A Closed Fist Has No Claws. I was like, there is so much in here in what Marta is saying, but so much
Mm,
in what she's not saying that I'm like, I feel like this one really needs to be like sat with and thought about and like unpacked at this level of just like reflection, personal thought, because there is so much happening
yeah.
in the background of this that sets up like where we are in the future. But it's just
Mm,
it's so good, and I'm so excited for more Tessa Gratton. Like, because
yes.
Tessa's doing Temptation of the Force, right?
Yes. So
Just
that'll be
ready to
the
be
next
emotionally
one.
devastated
Yes.
at every level.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready.
I say I'm ready, but like check back with me when I've read it. I'm just a mess.
It's I think I am more excited about this next book that Tessa Gratton's doing than I have been for any High Republic book so far. Almost. There are some like close contenders, but I just want to see what this author is going to do. Um, it's going to be really, really, really good.
Oh yeah.
I don't even know what else to say about it because it's like, and it's so close. June is
Yeah,
not that far away.
it's early June too, so 2 months.
Yeah. Oh man.
That's wild to
Um,
think about.
it really is. I also loved um the Axel story because
I
I love his
love Axel
character.
Greylock.
He's just great in every way, and then not, but also he is.
He's just,
Um,
we love a space rake.
yes.
I love him. I love that he's consistently trying to do the right thing, but also
Mm,
part of him is like trying to do the most self-serving thing and how,
yes.
but it never comes across in like a selfish, mean-spirited way. It's just like kind of, well, that's how the galaxy works. I have to look out for me. And that sometimes works with him doing the right thing, but it sometimes comes in conflict with that and just how he reconciles that
Mm,
within himself makes him so fascinating to me. This is what I mean when I say we're going to get more from the High Republic when this is done, because if we don't get more of like the quartet from phase two, like
mm,
Axel and Gela and Siri and Fontu, I will be very
yes.
surprised.
Well, especially because it was shorter. We only got two waves.
Exactly.
And
Like,
I'm like, I know you had to do it that way, and the stories worked that way, but also like I need
mhm.
more of them. Like I was so sad to leave them. Like I, as excited as I was to go back to phase three, I'm like, but I'm gonna miss these characters. And like you said, there's no like guarantee that we're done with them forever, but still.
It just, yeah, because like everything else, I get why phase two was as long as it was, because like it's all surrounding this, like Jeddah and Dalna and like what happened there and how that informs phase three. So to continue past that would have kind of lost focus. And I understand why they didn't, because this is where the key stuff is.
Mm,
But to never continue past that, I think is just such a missed opportunity. So I'm convinced they're going to do it. Like when the phases are done, when the waves are done,
yeah.
that's going to
Uh,
happen. It has to.
yeah, I think so. It's just everyone wants more. And there's so much more story to be told. I mean, that's the case throughout all of Star Wars. But like, we got this entirely new era with the High Republic. And like you can't just spend 5 years on it and then be done. Well, it's
No,
like that would be a tragedy, really.
yeah, no, it's just, it's such a, not, what am I trying to say here? It's such a unique phenomenon. And I think this is why it's kind of, like you were saying earlier, kind of captured people in a way that we hadn't seen before. Because up until the Acolyte comes out, and I guess Young Jedi Adventures, but up until that point, it was such a strictly book, comic written thing that
Mm,
like there was no other way for you to experience this era. Like it's not, with some books, people being like, well, I don't like the prequel era or the sequel era or the original, like whatever. I don't vibe with this era. I don't vibe with
mm,
like soldiers as opposed to Jedi, like whatever. So therefore, I'm not going to engage with this book. The entirety of this is contained within these books. So I think, where am I going with this? So I think like having it in 5 years as like this very fixed thing, now with like the Acolyte coming out, they're like, okay, this is done. The Acolyte story has been told. Now you're all here. You're all hooked. We have you for life. Let's go.
mm.
Here are all the other stories we're going to tell, like outside of that 5 year, 3 phase block.
Yeah, I need it. I'm so excited for the future, but like we just don't know what's gonna happen. Oh,
What
that's
is
what
Star Wars fandom if not convincing ourselves we know where this is going and then
I know.
being like, just kidding.
Well, I mean, speculation is fun, but I'm also very much like, I'm probably going to be wrong most of the time, but that's okay.
That's okay. We just roll with it.
Like, we'll have had this entire conversation and then they'll be like, yeah, High Republic's done forever. And we'll be like, why? I really, I
I
don't think.
I would riot. I don't think they would. If
I
nothing
don't think,
else, like the number of New York Times bestsellers in this thing, like there's no
yes.
way any publisher would be like, I think we're done here.
Yeah. Well, also, like, you know, I think the fandom would be genuinely upset.
Oh yeah, we would riot.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people who their first Star Wars books were High Republic. And now they've, not
Yeah.
everyone, but now so many have gone off and, now they're reading other things because they're like, oh, Star Wars books can be this. And now I want to see what else is out there. And I think that's cool. Or even like it goes even further than that sometimes, where I've seen people who are not even really into Star Wars that much. And they're like, oh, I heard about this book called Light of the Jedi. I'm gonna read it. And now they're like, oh, like now I am watching all the animated shows. And I'm like, a book did that.
Yeah. And just imagine the spike these books are going to get once The Acolyte comes out this summer.
I know. I
Because
know.
then they'll be like, this is so cool. I want more of like this vibe. And it's like, well, do we have a, I don't know, 20 book series for you? Here you go.
Oh, I've definitely lost count. I was counting for a while and now I have no idea. I just know that I don't have actually any more room on my High Republic shelf. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna fix that. Other than just redoing the entire thing. Because I'm like, I had them all stacked in a row perfectly, and now you just keep releasing more. Yeah.
I, for anybody listening to get a gauge of the scale, my Star Wars shelf, it's entirely chronological, like starting with the High Republic and then it just goes. I have a Billy bookcase and I have maybe half a shelf's worth of space total. Like if I cheat everything over, I have maybe a half shelf of space.
Oh,
So I'm well aware this is going to have to expand in some way. I don't know how yet, but I'm in
I mean,
trouble is what I'm trying to say.
I think it's a good problem to have.
It's an
Um,
excellent problem to have.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that you can never have too many books. Someone else in my
Right.
household disagrees with me on that, but I don't care. Every time I get a new book, it's like, where are you gonna put that one? Somewhere on the shelf. I mean, I have a bunch stacked on the floor right now, but like that counts. Books
And
matter.
then and then when you can't stack them on the floor anymore, then you just got to get more shelves.
Oh, I need a bigger office or a bigger house.
I was
If
looking
you
around my office earlier, like, I don't actually have any room for more shelves. This is going to be a problem.
They're not mine, but if you could see all of the Vader helmets that are staring at me right now as I'm recording, because there's nowhere else for them to go except for on this desk.
So he has Vader
Collectors,
helmets, you have books. It's balance is what it is.
I think collectors are the best kinds of fans, and they're the most reckless also.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like especially niche collectors that are like, this is my thing,
Yeah.
and this is what we're collecting. So much fun.
And then two of them get together and you're like, we have an actual problem now. It's fine. There's not a crisis here. Um, Other stories that we liked. I also liked the one on Coruscant at the very end. Because I
Yeah.
love Lydia King, first of all. Um, but because I actually just listened to that one again this morning. And I forgot like how good it was to read a story of someone of a Jedi who got to experience a different way of living.
Hmm.
Which you don't always get, where you're like, oh, like I could potentially have the option to go down a different path and live this kind of life.
Hmm.
I love stories like that where um the Padawan book was a lot like that, the Obi-Wan book, where
Yeah.
he went to this whole planet and got to like for the first time really start to understand like, oh, like if I didn't continue on as I am, like the universe actually would not end and it could actually be okay. Um,
Hmm.
which in a lot of cases, in Obi-Wan's case, uh, makes the decision to continue on so much more powerful because you know what could have been, but you also knew in your heart what the right thing was to do. I love it.
I love anytime the Jedi get to kind of explore that perspective. And what I liked about the Call of Coruscant, not the Call to Coruscant, the Call of Coruscant, like I love all the stories. Like let me be clear, I love all the stories in the book.
Mhm.
But what's Cavan's story called? Light in the Darkness is sort of a version on that same theme where we have like
Mm.
somebody who used to be a Padawan who now no longer, right? Is that the one? No, it's not Light in the Darkness. It's Alyssa Wong's story. I got
Yes.
them mixed up. Rogue Element. It's Rogue Element that deals with this. Where it's somebody who used to be a Padawan who is no longer a Padawan and is trying to find their place in all this.
Mm.
And what I like about this is for us as an audience, we have such a concept of Coruscant because that's the capital. That's where the main Jedi temple is. Like every other planet that we've seen the Jedi on with like temples, even somewhere like Corellia, which is also core, it's also a city planet. It's not like out in the wilderness, but in all these other places, we kind of have a sense that the Jedi at the temple and the people who live locally kind of have a much more organic relationship. Like the Jedi are very much a part of everyday life and they're just a fixture in the community. Whereas in Coruscant, you get the sense that they are so removed
Mm.
from them because they have like the temple complex that everybody kind of lives and works and trains in the temple and don't really get
Yeah.
out much. So for Amadeo is the Padawan's name, right? So for him to like get out on this planet where he admits he hasn't been to very much, and also to like really explore this planet that doesn't really have a relationship with the Jedi in the way that the other
Mm.
places do, and under that lens contemplate like I would live in this place where the Jedi are like most visibly prominent kind of center of the city sort of thing, and to not live that life, what does that look like for me?
Mm.
It's such an interesting question for him to ask. Because if it had been anywhere else, like if he had been in the Outer Rim and been like, actually, I don't know that the Jedi path is for me, I'm going to live locally and do XYZ,
Mm.
like the Jedi would still be a part of his everyday life because of
Yeah.
how knit those communities are. But that wouldn't be the case on Coruscant. So that's like a really big question for him to ask himself. And then like Obi-Wan to come to the conclusion that like, no, this is the path I want to walk. I hope that made sense.
Alyssa, it did. Alyssa Long really just like took this story and was like, hey, I know this is my first like entry into the High Republic, but how about this?
What if we just tell the like most heartbreaking, deep, like insightful, what if like they really kicked off their Project Luminous journey with like a bang, like a
Yes.
straight up banger.
Amazing. And I know this is technically an exclusive story that's only in the Barnes and Noble edition, but I highly, highly encourage you to read it if you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is one of my favorites in all these stories. And it's not in the standard version, but that's okay.
It was rough. I wouldn't have had this version of it if Hope hadn't sent it to me for
Oh
my
yeah,
birthday. Because we don't have like I live in Canada, we don't
America.
have Barnes and Noble here. So I'm like, I was prepared to just find it somewhere, like borrow it from somebody, come to the States and just read it in the bookstore, like just so I can say I've read it. But it's like, I hope this finds its way to a broader audience because it's a
Yeah,
fantastic story.
it really is. And I felt bad when, I first posted about getting that version because I wanted the extra story. It was also a rare case where the Barnes and Noble edition had an actual different cover. Because
Mm-hmm.
usually what their covers are the same, so I don't usually get them because cover's the same. Doesn't really matter that much, and the inside's the same, but this one had a different cover, so I wanted that too. But when I first posted it, and people were like, "Well, I don't live in the US, so I can't get this story," and I'm like, I wish I don't know. I'm sorry. It's not fair, but also like I know why they did it, but also I know
It would
it's
be
not fair.
it would be nice if I know the old books used to use like the paperbacks that they used to put out at Del Rey
Mm,
would have like insider short stories at the end. Like periodically,
mm.
they don't really do that much anymore, but they used to. I think that would be really nice if like for one of the YA books, they were to just tuck this one in the back, like of the standard
Yeah.
edition. That way
I mean,
everybody could have it.
it's been long enough now. Where it'll be a year later this year. Like,
Yeah,
just
like
put it in there.
who's writing the next YA book? Do we know?
Is it Zoraida?
She's doing the middle grade.
Mm,
What I'm wondering is if Alyssa is writing another
I can't
like a
remember because
YA
I can't remember the summer fall of this year.
to Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's just froze on me. All right, there we go.
Of
Um,
course.
okay, so oh no, that's a short story. Okay, so Alyssa is not writing any of the books anymore. That's sad.
I don't know. Only got one.
I mean, maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll just surprise drop something.
Maybe. That would be fun. Because this anthology short story format was so unique for this initiative, like we've talked about a couple times, the initiative as we know it is ending in 2025. Um, but do you think we'll get another short story anthology? Do you think
I'd be
like
very
they'll do
surprised
this
if we
again?
didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe not to cap, maybe to cap it off actually, because
Mm,
this doesn't like this doesn't sound fair, and I'm saying it aware that it's an unfair statement,
mhm,
but by and large, people reading the series, like if they're not in it like we are and just like reading every little thing, they tend to not read the middle grade stuff. Which, first of all, if you're
yeah.
not reading the middle grade stuff, you should, because it's
Do it.
great. Like I'm like one of those people who will just forever tell people that you can't just read the adults or just read the like YA. You should be reading like at least all the books. If
Mhm,
like, because I know comics are harder to access, but
yeah.
so that's kind of my flag that I wave for the High Republic. But
Yeah.
because the last book coming out in 2025 is the middle grade,
Mm,
that feels to me like, just given the stakes and scale of each story, like a funny way to do a finale is to
mm,
end on the typically lower stakes adventure
yeah.
for all that they are. So I would not be surprised if they capped it off with an anthology, be it YA, be it like an adult novel, but to kind of like end it in some sort of grand finale fashion.
Mm. And I think it would be fun also for the aspect of all the authors getting to contribute to one final thing together.
It'll be like a
Um,
curtain call.
yeah, exactly. Oh, I just got chills. I think that would be really sweet because like they have been working on this together for so long and
Hmm.
they work so well together. And a lot of them will continue to write their own Star Wars things or they'll co-write Star Wars things together, some of them, but it's likely that, they won't contribute to an initiative like this all together again. And like, I think it would be really fun for them to be like, let's one more time just go out with a bang.
I would like love to see. They obviously haven't announced anything to that
Yeah.
vein yet, but it kind of makes me think of when phase one ended. Like we had the Fallen Star, which was like the big set piece. And
Mm,
then we had Midnight Horizon, which was like an adventure on its own, but also a really good finale like to it,
yeah.
because it ended with Yoda being like, well, to understand the future, we have to go to the past. And that felt like, cue the Star Wars theme, the title credits in blue are
Yes.
coming up. Like
Oh,
that's such a punchy way to end it.
oh,
But
yes.
like there's like a month, I think. I just looked at the calendar and now I'm blanking on dates, but I think it's like, I don't know the order that these last books are releasing in, but I know that the middle grade is scheduled last
Mm,
on Wikipedia for now,
mm.
which to me, like, could be the punchiest of finales, but probably won't have the same stakes that like the other ones will, because the readership is younger. Like it's
Yeah.
just rightly so. You should be writing to your age demographic. So if they were to
Yeah.
curtain call it with like a tales of da 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 da,
Mm.
like something more appropriate for the end of the phase, end of the entire initiative, whatever that might be.
Even
I think that
just
would
to
be very
like,
appropriate.
yeah, even just to like end it with like, here's where all of your favorite characters end up. And just to
Honest
really
and
like, yeah,
yeah. And we could go back to phase two and be like, here's what happened to those people that didn't like bleed forward into phase three. And here's what happened to all these people. And then, or not even like, here's where they ended up, but like, here's a final story of them
mm,
following this grand, I'm assuming bombastic finale that we're getting in the
mm,
last book. So
oh, I can't wait. It's one of those like, I'm gonna be so sad when it's over, but I get more and more excited about it with each new book that comes out.
I'm like pretty emotional, like ahead
I,
of
I
time.
I'm getting emotional as we're sitting here talking about this.
Like, I'm just remembering how emotional it was when phase one ended
Mm,
and phase two ended. And now I'm like, but, like, we knew that there was more coming. But when phase
yeah.
three ends, like we might know what's next, but we might not. And then like that's gonna be
Yeah.
a much harder thing to cope with.
Oh, yeah. And we're almost there, but not quite yet. And there's plenty more High Republic
So much
still
more coming.
coming. More comics, more books. However, the Acolyte's going to tie into all of this.
Oh
That's going to
man.
add a lot of interesting things to the conversation, I think. Like, even if there are subtle references, I mean, we just don't know. A lot of people, like, when the Acolyte trailer came out, they were like, okay, like, what High Republic do I need to read before the show comes out? And there's no way to know. Um,
There's I would be surprised if any of it was must read before it came
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, probably
Because like
not.
probably not. Like if you want to know more about Vernestra, we can give you
Yeah.
a list of things. If you want to know more about the era, you could just start reading it. But I don't know if I mean, obviously, like as a disclaimer, I don't know anything about the series beyond what we've
Yeah,
seen,
me neither. So yeah.
but like you probably don't need anything to like have a satisfying viewing experience.
Yeah. Probably not. It's probably designed that way, intentionally, which is a good thing because you want, I think like some people don't like that where you don't get all of the background, but I'm like, but that's your incentive to go off and find more information if you want it. You don't need it. You don't
Yeah,
have to do the homework, but it's extra credit if you want to.
that's the best kind of viewing experience. Like if you, because any TV show worth their salt will explain what you need to know in the context of the series. Like Vernestra is, I don't know, like a Jedi Master. Cool.
Hmm.
That's what we needed to know. Vernestra has suffered horrific loss in her past. Great. Like explain that to us on screen. But if you want more, like if you want to go in depth, if you want to kind of learn how we got to this point, you can.
Yeah.
You don't have like, like reading all the like reading Padawan and Master and Apprentice is great. You don't need that to understand Obi-Wan like the series because that came out like after. So
Right.
because the prequels are different because those came out way before, but like you don't need those books to understand like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. It doesn't
Right.
inform it at all, but it does, if you would like that, that's there.
And to your point about everyone should read the middle grade High Republic books
You should.
if they want to. That's where we first meet Vernestra. So
Mhm.
don't miss out on that because I love A Test of Courage. Like I think I did. No, it would have been the second one I would have read, but I read that and I'm like, I don't know if I'd read too many middle grade Star Wars books before that, but I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, it doesn't matter if I know the target audience. Who cares? It's a great story.
They are the most like having read the other Star Wars middle grade books, the High Republic ones are the ones that appealed to me the most. And I think it's because the other ones, and this is like no fault to the authors whatsoever. Like
Mhm.
this is no shade, this is not a knock, but like the other middle grade books are telling stories about grown-ups to a very young audience. Because those
Yeah.
are like all we really had to work with in Star Wars. So of course
Yeah.
that's who you're telling the story about. But what makes the High Republic one so special is it's telling a story about 12, 13, 14, 15-year olds to 10-year-olds. Like it's because
Yeah.
they're much closer in age. It feels a little more like we're not trying to like reduce and simplify an adult experience for a young person's ears. It's like, no, this is like
Right.
something that is very relatable to you and something that like a position you might not the life or death wise, but like having to make
Yeah.
tough decisions, having to grow up, having to do all this is something that's very present for the reader, like as
Yeah.
a younger reader. So I think that's why they just vibe so well.
Yeah. They really do. And I try to think about like, even if you are older than the middle grade book target audience and you're hesitant about reading those books, just like as you're reading A Test of Courage or whatever one you want to read, think about how that book what it would have meant to you when you were that age.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think about like some of the themes and some of the lessons and some of the just things that it touches on. And I'm like, if I would have had this book then, that would have been life-changing, you know?
Yeah.
So think about it that way, maybe. Because a lot of people are hesitant, and there are different reasons for that. And there are some people who have tried middle grade Star Wars and it's not for them, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be for you. But I do encourage you to try it.
Yeah.
Um, just try it.
And
Don't think that it's not worth it just because it's middle grade or for children. I mean, Star Wars is for children just overall. So
some of my favorite Star Wars stories are the Jedi Apprentice series, like the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon
yeah,
series, which like I read that God, 2 years ago, which is terrifying to think about because time is meaningless. But
right.
like those are some of my favorite stories. They're so fun and they are absolutely for 10-year-olds. Like
Yeah,
absolutely for very young readers. But they are so fun because there's this pressure in like adult novels and even YA novels to kind of make it about the big plot in addition to the characters, and like we have to like have all this lore and we have to have the the big galaxy-wide stakes, and there's like a very large cast, whereas the middle grade books, High Republic specifically, we got like 3 or 4 kids set against the backdrop of whatever big plot happens to be happening in that wave. But that doesn't really, they don't engage with that. They just engage with like the fallout of whatever the big incident of this wave is.
Yeah.
So it kind of keeps it relatable for like a younger audience, and like doesn't make the younger audience feel like they have to read the stuff that's too old for them. But then what results is like this really tight, compact, like adventure story about, you know, life and growing up and friendship and stuff like that. So it's really, really worth your time. And they're not long. So if you're like a completionist and you just want to read it all, but you don't really jive with middle grade, they're also not very long. Yeah. So
I will say, without spoiling it, Escape from Valo is one of my favorite High Republic books so far overall. And it's a middle grade book. It's just so good. And that's like a really good example of like, you don't always know what you're getting into before you get into it. And it's a beautiful story.
It really is. This is why I'm sad it doesn't look like Alyssa's writing another book.
I know. We only got a little bit.
Why?
Ugh. I know. Oh, no. I don't know. They've got some comics to write. I don't know.
I mean, good for them. I'm glad they're thriving, but also,
I know.
Alyssa, please.
Please. I mean, you know, more High Republic when we get it after 2025.
Yes, exactly. That's when Alyssa's going to step in.
There you go. Oh, this has been fantastic. I've wanted to talk about this book forever. And I never, like, the reason that it sometimes takes me a while to get to these discussions is sometimes I never know how to tackle books like these, because I'm like, do we talk about all the stories? Do we talk about the author? Like, you know, and it ended up being a mix of things. And as usual, just us gushing about how great the High Republic is the whole time, which is exactly what I wanted.
Happily, anytime I will gush about how awesome the High Republic is, because it's so good. It's some of, if not the best Star Wars storytelling happening right now. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So good.
I want to do some kind of, I haven't obviously thought deeply about it yet, but I want to do some kind of celebration of the High Republic as a whole on the show when it's ending. And I'm definitely going to have you back for that in 100%. Some capacity, because it's just, the High Republic has been just so unique, and something that Star Wars Publishing really hasn't done anything like this, where it's just weaving all these things together quite like this. And yeah, so you'll be back for that, because
I will gladly come back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on and talking to me about this wonderful, wonderful anthology. Why don't you tell all the people where they can find you and all the things you do on the Star Wars internet?
Yeah, so I am, for better or worse, still on Twitter, which I don't call X because that sounds weird. I'm at Arezou Amin there. I'm at arzouamin.bluesky.social on Blue Sky. I'm at Arezou on Instagram and Threads, if that's your thing. I haven't figured out how Threads works quite yet, because every time I go there, I see one post by somebody I know and then a bunch of rage bait, clickbait nonsense after that.
Oh no.
So I haven't quite figured out Threads yet. I'm on there if you want to follow me, but I don't really post. And then you can find all my work in my bio, Twitter being the best place to find that.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack and Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.